In this video, you'll learn how to hold the power of insulation in the palm of your hand. In other words, we're creating insulation. First, let's touch on why. Why insulation? Why even bother? Well, let's take a look at my scene here. Without insulation, it looks really bad. It's just blank nothing really. When I add insulation back in, it just makes the whole render a lot more realistic. It adds detail and kind of a touch of human error. It kind of looks messy. It's adding two things, a layer of detail and a layer of realism. It's detail because the walls aren't just blank spaces anymore. We're putting in all these little bits and pieces that give your eyes something to kind of feast upon. It's adding realism because this is what we see in real life. This kind of messy, functional work exists in a lot of real spaces. Now, my example here is this framed out room, but this will work anywhere really. You can stuff this insulation literally anywhere to add a whole new layer of realism. You can add it to engines, spaceships, superstructures, wrap it around things, add it to pipes. It adds that very powerful element of soft detail to an otherwise hard render. Now, there are a lot of different kinds of insulation in the world. I went through a ton of reference looking at different kinds. I ended up choosing 5 top kinds of insulation. There's regular fiberglass batts, which are these big pink pieces. These are great fillers. They're most commonly used in walls, anywhere you need a big chunk of insulation, sometimes the ceiling maybe. Next, we've got foil-backed panels. These work anywhere that you need a flat, rigid piece of insulation. They're often used for a walk-in cooler or a cold room, something like that. I could see them being stuck on the outside of an engine or some kind of large industrial room. Next is pipe insulation. This is like a black pool noodle with a gap in it that you can pop over a pipe to keep it warm or cold, and it's very simple. It's essentially just a pool noodle. Next, we have the most awesome kind, which is spray foam. And this allows you to fix just about any gap anywhere. It's great for just filling gaps in scenes, covering up little holes, hiding seams and textures, hiding repetition in a texture maybe, and hiding any seam whatsoever and making it look like something important is there when it's not. It's just empty space and you put spray foam in it. And finally, we have quilted insulation. This is the kind of insulation you put like where people are going to see it, like around some kind of container or on walls of your spaceship, somewhere where it needs warmth and it needs to look kind of put together and contained and not a total mess. So somewhere that is meant to be viewed gets this kind of insulation. So in the next section of the video, I'm going to teach you how to create these 5 kinds of insulation. Then I'll give you some tips for installing them. Once you finish the video, could you leave a comment? Just tell me what you thought of the video. It really helps me create better videos, which end up making your life better. So if you leave a comment, you're really helping yourself. First, we'll create the classic pink insulation bat. So what we start with is the default cube, of course, and what we're going to do is squash it down like that, and then stretch it out to make it longer. This will be the general shape, and you'll end up being able to customize this, to fit in any space. Use Ctrl-R and cut an edge loop around the default cube. This makes sure that this side and this side are both squares, which will subdivide better when we add the subdivision modifier. Switch that to simple, and turn up the levels. Next, add a displace modifier. Press new texture, go to the texture panel, switch it to distorted noise. Now adjust the strength. In this case, we want a negative strength so that it pushes it outward. And go back into the texture settings, adjust the size to make it bigger. That is much better. Next, shade it smooth and weaken that a little bit more. Okay, and that is the base shape of the model. Next, we need to texture it. So let's create a new material and name it Fiberglass. Add an image texture and pick a fiberglass texture. Plug that into the base color. Now we're going to add some normal bump to it as well. So add a bump node and use a noise texture for the height. If you preview the noise texture, hit Ctrl-T with the noise texture selected to add texture coordinate node and then scale it that to make it more fibrous. Take a look at it now. It is too strong, so decrease the strength. Let's switch our render engine to cycles to get a real look at what this was going to look like, and choose a test HDRI to get a look at it. Next step is to turn up the roughness. We'll use this to control the roughness with a color ramp. You can see that's going to be our roughness. That should do fine. Also, we're going to need to make that rougher. It looks really shiny now. Click in the black and raise it up. And now this looks too strong, so let's make that a lot fainter. Could always turn up the distortion to mess up the noise a little bit. That's better. Okay, let's add subsurface scattering. Pop open subsurface and turn up the weight. It's going to slow down render time, but this stuff, light really does kind of go into it a little bit, so you do want to do that. If I enable denoising in the viewport, I can get a better look at what it's going to look like. And I'm happy with that for now, so let's go into the UV editor, turn on material preview mode, pop open our insulation texture, and hit A to select all, U to unwrap, and then C for a cube projection. Select everything and place it inside one of these segments. See, we even got a nice seam in there, and I think that should do. You have now got a pink insulation bat you can install anywhere. You can also scale this in edit mode, and displace modifier will update, which is nice. So yeah, there is the pink insulation bat. Next, we'll create foil-backed foam panels. So I'm just going to delete everything and start an empty scene. These panels are what you use when you need a flat, hard piece of insulation, and they're surprisingly easy to make. So first thing to do is grab a plane and extrude it just a little to make the panel. There we go. Now, all of this one relies on the material, which, again, is really simple. Just name it foil, and we're going to leave the base color as is for now. We're going to turn down the roughness and turn up the metallic to make it look like foil. Problem is, it's perfectly smooth. If you look at a piece of this, it is often got little tiny bumps in it. So for that, we need a bump node and a noise texture. That's exactly what we need, only it's way too big, so we increase the scale to a very high number. It needs to look bumpy when you get up close, and let's turn down the strength to make it more moderate. It's still reflective, just lightly bumpy is the goal. That is actually looking quite good, and we'll duplicate this noise texture, turn the scale back down, and use it to add a little bit of surface interest with a color ramp. Turn up the detail, add into the roughness, and adjust the roughness down. So I change the black to a lower amount, and we'll have a noisy kind of pattern in our roughness. Alright, that looks great. Next, we want to put some labels, some numbers on it. And you can also add a grunge texture to this. If you add an image texture, you can also add a grunge texture to this. Simply add an image texture, add a mix shader, add a diffuse, make it brown for dirt color, and then use the texture to mix between them. And you can see now there's some gross drippy stuff on there, which is perfect. Next, we need to add some of those little labels that get put on this stuff, so just tab into it. Oh, sorry. Next, we need to add some of the little text labels you see on these, so let's add a new plane. This will be a label. And on here, make a new material, call it label, and the material will be a mix shader. We'll mix a principled, should not have deleted that other one, make it a dark color for the text, and we'll mix it with a transparent, not a translucent, a transparent. Now we can control how solid it is by doing that, and we're just going to control that with a picture of some letters. So go into your favorite typing app and make a black and white picture of some text or label. And then just add that in an image texture. I've got one here with several options on it. And then go to UV editor, scale this to match the right size. And I'll use this one right here. And you just line it up like that, and then you have that. Now I will take this plane, stick it there, and you want to stick it just above the surface. Not through it, just barely above. That's good. Scale it to a reasonable size, really just whatever size you want it. And these kind of repeat over the surface, so make like 2 of them, and then usually there's a bigger label repeatedly giving you the quality of the insulation, which is measured in R's. So I just grab this. I've got a big rating on there now. If you go back into cycles, we want this to control not the base color, the alpha. Oh wait, sorry, we want that to control the factor. It's better. Also, you can go into the object visibility here, open that up, turn off shadows so it doesn't accidentally cast a shadow anywhere, which would give up that it's not actually printed on there. Okay, and now you just grab that and join them to the main piece. And on the main piece, select the backing right here and select the top. Press Ctrl I to switch the selection, and Shift Q if you have this add-on enabled. Material utilities, add new material, white foam, and just make it rough. Make it slightly yellowed. Oops, I seem to have reset the material on these as well. So I'll just assign the label back on those. And that's it for the foil panel. You now have a piece of foil panel insulation you can use along with your pink fiberglass bat. Next, we're going to go on to create that black pipe foam used to insulate pipes. This one will be pretty easy, so just delete that, add a new cylinder, add subdivision surface modifier, and a bevel modifier. Actually, I don't think we need to subdivide it. Bevel it slightly, turn the segments up, and shade auto smooth. Now rotate the whole thing, the x-axis, make it longer. You'll have to customize this to your needs, obviously. And then we're going to cut a little crevice in it, which is where it fits around the pipe. So first, that's where the pipe fits inside of it. Just select that end, and then bridge edge loops. You can find that up in edge, bridge edge loops. Now select that face. I want to select this whole loop, really. Yep. and then delete that with X and delete faces. Now take this face, this edge loop, hit F to fill it, select that edge loop, hit F to fill it, and you have the pipe insulation shape. Now when you actually put this on a pipe, you're going to need to adjust its shape a little bit, so add a couple of edge loops. Here's how you do that. Grab an edge loop, and then move it, say, like that, a little bit on the X, put it on the Y. You want it to look a little bit messed up, a little bit, because it doesn't go on smoothly when you put this on. It might look a little bit messed up. Now select both of these loops and hit Ctrl B to bevel them. Add more segments, and there you go, nice mushed up shape. Don't do this on the initial one, just do this when you install it. That way each one can have kind of a different bend as you put it around your scene. And let's add a quick material. This one we'll just name it black foam, and this time make it black. We're gonna leave the roughness where it is for a moment. See how that works. Add a bump. Oh, my typing is really bad today. Bump height will be a noise. Goodness. Noise texture. Turn up the scale really high. That is looking quite good. I'm going to switch this to see it in better light. And you can see it looks stretched, so let's add a texture coordinate here and push it back down. Getting beveled right there? Oh, it's alright. I don't know what that is from. Maybe it's up too high. If I had a subdivision surface modifier, cleans it up a little bit. Okay. I like that. And you may want to adjust that to taste, but there's your black pipe foam. It was surprisingly easy to make, right? Okay, next up is the absolutely most versatile type of insulation, which is spray foam. Before we make it though, don't forget to join the Blend, which is an exclusive Blender email for people who want to learn how to create reality in Blender as easily as possible. And it's also free. Okay, onto the spray foam. Let's just delete this, add a cube. Actually, we're going to start with a curve. We make this on a curve. Okay, so we want to turn this into spray foam. And to do that, we're going to use geometry nodes. And this will be very simple. Anyone can understand it, nothing complicated. New nodes, name it foam. Okay, the first thing we need to do is convert our curve into points so that we can instance stuff on them. Shift A, curve to points. You can just type the initials of the node you want and it should get it. Instead of count, we want length, so that it will be the same no matter the length. Just turn that down till you get a lot like that. Next thing is we're going to move these points around a little bit with a set position. And for the offset, we'll use a random number. This is far too big, so do like 0.05 and -0.05. Next, we are going to put icospheres on every point. So instance on points. And for the instance, just get an icosphere and make it tiny with this radius slider right here. Somewhere in there. You'll probably want to adjust this later. And I want to offset the position a little more, so I'm going to go -0.1 and 0.1. As we scroll through here, how it's got this messy shape. We also turn up the length so that we have less of them. You have all these controls here. That's looking good. You can see how it's almost looking like spray foam already. And let's, in the scale here, add a random value. We want to switch that to a float. Plug that in so the scale is consistent in every direction. And you've got a minimum and a maximum. Like a bigger maximum, a smaller minimum, so there's contrast in the size. You do want to make sure it's still all connected though. To do that, maybe we'll need to add some more back in. Alright, that is looking good. And finally, we just want to realize those instances. And to make it look like spray foam, let's add some random rotation really quick. You need to type, in this one type -pi, and this one just type pi. Now they'll be rotated randomly, which will help a little bit. And in the modifiers, we're going to add a remesh, which will convert it all to a nice mesh like that. And adjust this voxel size to just how accurate it is. That's too accurate, that's better. Make sure you check smooth shading to keep it smooth. And here we have spray foam. One last thing to do to set a material. You can't set a material once you've added this modifier, so you just need to hit a new over here, make a new geometry node, so just name it set material. This is a node group just for setting material. Add a set material node, of course, and just plug that in. So now over here we can just pick the material we want, which isn't there yet. Let's go to the shading tab. We'll make this one yellow, and over here make sure you set that in the modifier you just made. Call this brave, and let's make that a yellowish color. This stuff comes in all kinds of colors, so just make it a color that you've seen before and it should work. Want a low roughness, and we're going to need a noise texture. Noise to make these patches of color that this stuff has. Add a color ramp. Nope. Color ramp. Stuff is not all one even color. It gets sprayed out of a can, so it's kind of a mess. Setting both of these to the yellow I just picked. Now I'll make one of them a darker yellow. Yeah, that looks. Darken that more maybe. Oh, it's not connected. Make this one more saturated. Make this one more saturated. Okay, that is looking good, and we're gonna need a bump texture again. Bump height, be noise, way up, and make that super weak. This stuff has a lot of little like holes in it, like bubbles. And maybe if we set this to object, it'll look better. It does look better. Okay, next make this super weak. Okay, and here's spray foam. That is what it looks like. Now, here's the fun part. Just go to material preview so that it will load quickly. Add a cube. Select your spray foam. Press A. Go into edit mode. Press A and then X to delete every point. So now we have no foam at all. Then grab this tool here, which is the draw tool. Switch it to surface and you can draw on a surface, which means we can spray foam. As soon as we switch back to object mode, it all turns into spray foam. And you may want to tweak your settings to get this to taste. It might take you a few tries to get it looking exactly how you want. And if you want to see it while you spray it, you can simply go in here and turn on this, which means it will show it in edit mode. And now you can just spray the stuff all over the place, just like in reality. And it is a horrible mess. Okay, so that is it for spray foam. Obviously, tweak as needed. And here comes the final insulation. This is for those of you who need a really flexible insulation. So this is going to be the quilted fabric insulation. Okay, the quilted fabric is pretty easy to make. Just start with a plane, and as you can probably guess, subdivide it a bunch. Let's see, I just did about that far. And then go into Edge, Unsubdivide. Unsubdivide is kind of magical because if you switch it to 3, it will make a quilted pattern. And of course, you could have just left it a normal subdivision and then rotated this, but I think it's better if it's in this square shape. But you know, that's up to you. You don't have to do it that way. You just need a bunch of squares in some orientation. Now we are going to bevel all of these by extruding them upward. Do Option E, extrude individual faces, which keeps them all separate. Go up about that high. Press dot, pick individual origins, and scale them down. We need to adjust their positions. Okay, now we'll hit Control B and bevel them all. And looks good. We can go in here and adjust width type to %, or maybe not. No, I don't like that. Okay, I'm going to try that bevel again. I want to scale these down a little first. Control B, no, scale. Okay, that'll do. Shade smooth. Now, the biggest, most important part of this will be the material, which right now looks like nothing. So let's start out with quilt. First thing it needs is some noise. So give it a color ramp. Give it, let's see, what else does it need? It needs a noise texture. And that looks weird. Switch to UV. There we go. That's looking pretty good already, but let's change this to a yellowish color and change this to a light yellow so that it's a kind of yellowed old fabric. Okay, and these are just kind of faint patches of wear or dirtiness that help it feel realistic. Next, we're going to upgrade that with more noise. So let's just duplicate all of these, bring them up here. It's going to delete that. So I think if you press delete on a node, it just resets it. And don't press X, press delete. And RGB curves. Take a look at that for a minute. Good. The RGB curves, we can make this go. We want to make some stains, so we're going to try to make those rings that stains leave. We can make these squiggles in here. That looks quite good. Adjust the scale, and we need to add a color ramp in there to clip some of them out. It's a little hard to get right. It took me several tries. Okay, I'm happy with a pattern like that. Those look like water stains. To make them bigger, and we'll just use them to control a mix color. That is the factor. And make the mix color a yellow. You can see we've got our yellow stains on there. Let's make them darker. Okay, looking good. And the last step is to darken the cracks here between the fabric. And there's a couple ways to do that. Let's try using a position. And if we do separate on this and just look at the Z, we get this mask of just the high parts. Color ramp that. Very nice grid of all the crevices. So we'll just take that color there and mix it back in to everything else. And instead of a mix, let's use a multiply to add that darkness. We'll just multiply them together, known as a factor. You can control how much of that we're seeing. It's looking a little bit weird though. I'm gonna leave it as a factor and just pick a dark color. Let's take a look at that again. Okay, looks good. Oh, I left it on multiply. I meant to switch it to mix. That's the problem. There we go. And we can make this color of our choice. Also, we can go in here, grab the black, and make it lighter so that it is weaker. Okay, there we have the quilted insulation. You can do a lot more things like adding more noise and things like that. One thing I do like to do is go back over here and add a displace, new texture, switch texture, and make that a cloud. Make it bigger, and go in here and change the direction to Z, and much weaker. The only problem with this is that it now messes up the materials, so you can just do it really gently, not do it at all. Or you could try choosing a different way of doing the material rather than the Z position. I think that'll look fine. It's great. Okay, so here's the final result. quilted insulation ready to be stuck on some panel, wrapped around something like that. Okay, now you have all 5 kinds of insulation. The elements of the periodic table of insulation. How you use it is up to you, but here are 3 basic principles. First principle is bend everything. You can bend or smush almost all of these, and they'll look more realistic if you do. Bend them so they fit whatever you're using them for, but never bend the foil panel. You could stick some dents in it or displace it slightly and that would look okay, but this stuff is very stiff and it snaps if you bend it even a little. So it's not good for bending. You can bend this kind or these, or you can bend the quilt. Don't use too much. I'm using a lot in this scene because it's a scene made of insulation, but it adds a nice layer of realism to a real scene. But if literally everything is plastered in insulation, it'll start to look funny and unnatural and fake. And third, watch where you put it. Don't insulate something for no reason at all. Put bats and panels in walls or flat panel areas. Use the pipe foam on pipes or other round places. And use spray foam in corners and to seal gaps. You don't want to stick it on the floor in a random place or in the middle of a wall. Keep it where it would really go in reality. And that is it for the insulation tutorial. Usually we never think of insulation when it comes to creating a new 3D scene, but now you will.